Good afternoon, Catherine. How are you?
Good, yes.
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me for your interview about the professional inquiry.
Today we are going to talk about going from this card, the orange one, that's a provisionally registered early childhood teacher, to a purple one or lilac one. That's a beautiful full registration. So just to introduce it to our listeners, all early childhood teachers who are degree qualified teachers working in early childhood centers, long day care, preschools, kindergartens, pre-preps now have to be registered as early childhood teachers with in our state VIT, yeah, or Victorian Institute of Teaching. And that's what today's session is about, because it's not just easy it's not simply applying for this registration. You obviously need to go through a very important process that is called professional inquiry. And over to you, Lucy, to tell us about this process.
Yeah, I'm just one of these teachers Kate was talking about. I was on my third year of teaching when I needed to go through the process of professional inquiry. It was interesting. It was daunting. I discovered lots of things on the way, and today I'm going to tell you just hands-on details, which are really hard to come by because usually you're lucky if you're doing professional inquiries as a
Hmm.
so you completed your degree at the same time as your colleagues, but
Yeah.
as a rule, you're going it by yourself.
Hmm.
So to start a conversation about it is there's a lots of myths and rumors about what
Yeah.
inquiry is, and I'll try to bust these myths and
Yeah.
just to explain from personal experience what it is and what it isn't, at what important to look into. So everybody was telling you at the start, don't be scared. You can go through it. It can be quite easily
Yeah.
done. Um, I wouldn't just relax and rely on a current. It's a work which needs to be done in something which supposed to be embedded in our practices, but really
Yeah.
isn't. So in our way, you learn another way of doing your work, which is
Hmm.
rewarding, interesting,
Yeah.
but it's like undertaking research and doing it on your own time and also
Hmm.
doing your job. So it is quite full on. It's gives you lots of pressure, put it like that, because you're also time bound. But at the same
Hmm.
time, there's some variation and ideas I can give you along the way, which hopefully will
Yeah.
help a little bit with a frame of mind. First of all, everybody's going to VIT website and downloading
Hmm.
a huge VIT booklet
Yep.
like this one.
Yep. PRT guide. Yep.
First
Yeah, that's a
guide.
good one. Hmm.
I accidentally have it printed, not recommending printing it because you can read it unless you really like the paper, everything. You can read it,
Hmm.
can get the general idea. It's the first time I read it, it didn't give me a general idea. It pretty
Hmm.
much flew over my head. Like I knew there's like 26 descriptors, there's lots of information about it, and the whole
Yeah.
idea that you're doing some research on your working place.
Which could be an inquiry question about anything, right? So they don't really specify what
There's no
inquiry is
specifics
about.
about it. It's
Mhm.
why it's all VAT information, giving you information how you're doing it. It's not
Yes,
telling
yeah,
you what,
yeah,
but telling you
yeah.
how. So it's a
So yeah, that's
framework.
right.
It's
Hmm.
useful. It's you're getting an idea how you're going to work, but then it leaves why to
Hmm.
figure it out. So of course you will have a mentor, but with mentor it's an interesting thing that lots of people who are becoming your mentor after doing a course to become a mentor never went themselves through the professional inquiry process because when they reach the higher level of teaching,
Yeah.
in the past, we didn't need to go through this process. So my mentor was learning on her feet. She was learning on her feet
Hmm.
with me doing the inquiry how to actually go through it. Well, she didn't do it herself.
Hmm.
Back in the day,
Yeah.
it was level 2.2. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
And another thing, as I said, VIT booklet and VIT, they also have PD. You can go and do the professional
Yeah.
development session on just go to a website. We usually sometimes email the information about it, but they have a section about the professional developmental session. It's useful,
Yeah.
gives you a bit
Yeah.
more framework idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Well,
I actually attended one PD on how to go with your inquiry, and it was pretty good and well detailed,
mm,
but still didn't answer the question what do I do inquiry on and where to start. So it's all overwhelming. So after you completed this webinar, you are sitting there, still don't know what do I do.
still not sure. Yeah, I felt absolutely the same. It gave me some ideas. It gave me some like framework to work with.
Yeah.
But curiously enough and humorously enough, at the end of my inquiry, when I already was up to a point
Yeah.
of presentation, I discovered
Hmm.
a PD called Community of Practices. So it runs
Hmm.
every year. It actually runs every term. And
Hmm.
I was accidentally stumbled upon quality area 6, practical principle 6 from early learning
Hmm.
framework, community of practices, professional development station. It's
Hmm.
Salman Slattery. It's a free session.
Yeah. Yeah.
You need to book it. And it's absolutely amazing in terms of how actually you do a
Hmm.
professional inquiry, even though it's not about it. It's not about you
Yeah.
doing a professional inquiry once in a while, once in your lifetime. It's about working as a professional inquiry and practical principle 6, it's all about it. It's about assessment in early learning environment. How often do we do assessment? Not often. We do when we like doing our observations, but
Yeah.
not focusing on it enough to
Yeah.
actually see how inquiry might work. So Alma Fleet, who was running this workshop, put together pretty much a comprehensive framework on how you're doing inquiry. So it gives you all the answers, and I'm going to share the screen and show you. I had never been told that I can't share that.
Hmm.
And PD is free and accessible to everybody, so it's not some secret information. Can you see it well, Kate?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I'll just walk you through all these steps because it's pretty much what you do in like end up doing. I was going a bit back and forth with this inquiry, and I did a little bit too much, I would say, but it sort of clears it to the bone, put it like that. And what are you doing?
Hmm.
I really like
Yeah.
the start. It's called identify and niggle. Niggle is something which bothers you really, and you can't really put the finger on it. It's some part of your professional practice. Like I'll give you an example, for example, because when you're doing community of practices, 4-part PD, you're actually doing professional inquiry on some niggle you had in your
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
So the
Mm.
niggle in my space at that point was fighting. So I identified it as a rough play.
Hmm.
I have one kind of idea about how to approach the fighting between the children.
Hmm.
And my colleagues had another, so there was some disagreement about the strategies. So I framed the question, which is part 2, and it's not going to be a final question. It's going to be maybe something else when you move to
Hmm.
point 3. when
Yep.
you're doing professional inquiry or you're doing it just as a part of your work, it's very important to clarify things with your colleague you're working with. It's a
Yep.
mistake I actually made when I did my professional inquiry for the AT because I consulted with my mentor, I consulted with ed leader, with other teachers, educators, but we didn't
Yep.
go to the same group. When you
Mm-hmm.
talk to people about your niggle, you can discover different opinions and different
Yep.
views, which can change your view on it as well, because you need to consider something you don't see, something you don't really think about.
Yep.
And it's a brilliant and it's clarify the question and it actually you might think, okay, that's not the
Yep.
question. Maybe that is question. So you can change it after that meeting and conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So that you collect the baseline data. Um, so you just observe and see what is happening about it. So you gathering a little bit more, gathering like you already have a different perspective. You already
Yep.
clarified your question again. You analyze and read and hypothesize. So with
Mm-hmm.
fighting thing, I just collected lots of data. And I had
Yep.
another meeting with my colleagues, and we talked about it, and I shared my findings. And um, there we came up with strategies we could use in the room,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can observe it. So where your inquiry is happening is actually, oop, got 10 minutes on that meeting.
Yeah, it's just this one, but then we can do it again. So not a problem.
So when you clarify it with your colleagues, you implement
Mm-hmm.
change. So say we made a fighting ring, we set the time of the day, we talked about the rules
Mm-hmm.
around the fighting and how and when and what is
Mm-hmm.
happening.
Mm-hmm.
Then you observe and collect more data, and then
Mm-hmm.
again, repeat 5 and 6.
Mm-hmm.
So you can take a photo of his screen because, as I said, it's not some kind of secret data, but it's
Mm-hmm.
very clear explains what the inquiry really is. Because depending on how many days you having that choose that group in your center,
Mm-hmm.
like you have your 6 weeks of inquiry, and maybe you just have that group twice a week.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're coming there for 3 days and they're short
Yep.
days like in sessional kindergarten. Or they every day. It it will depend how many loops you can do and how many circles of
Yep.
questions and you're not doing several investigations. You're still progressing with
Mm-hmm.
one
Yep.
and you continuously learning from what is happening.
Yep.
Could you introduce the different strategy after you analyze it? Of course you can.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you continuously collecting the data while you're doing all these things. So I think if I would know, like you in end up doing what pretty much Alma explains, but at least you know
Yep.
why and how. And I think it just gives the this skeleton structure for you
Yep.
sort of bounce off. Like you can obviously do some other things within this structure, but it's just as clear as it is. So you might just do one progression, put it like that. You
Yeah.
advise, you implement, you collect the data. That
And
might
then you evaluate and
be
yeah, you might do it few times.
yeah. And then you create a statistical part. That's
So
another.
what they want to see is that you are using inquiry process, which is asking reflective questions, yeah, critical reflection, using Australian standards, EYLF, Victorian framework, whatever you are using already, to question some aspect of your program that you might either struggle with or you might improve. Yep.
Yeah, something
So
I really like
something
how
that is
Alma
tangible.
described it. It's just something which bothers you in the room, something which
Mhm.
requires answer. She called it, it's very sort of visually good image. It's something which bothers you. It's not a good or
Yeah,
bad thing. It's just something which divisive in the room, something you think, I might need to know
yeah,
more about it. It's something
yeah,
that bothers
yeah,
you
absolutely.
and answered. It's like your question which needs to be answered.
I also looked at some samples a few years ago on VIT website. I don't know if you did as well. They have completed programs that are scanned, usually handwritten or presentations like yours. And the topics people choose for inquiry, they are on the surface sometimes, but yours looks like quite an interesting one. What I mean by on the surface is how do we include children with different needs, right? So that's attention to inclusion and more specific strategies, how we support children who have autism, who might be nonverbal, how do we go about it, yeah. Then there was another student teacher who went through the registration, and they had completed Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives in a non-tokenistic way. So how can we work with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities to incorporate this into my program in a way that is meaningful? And that was a brilliant one as well. The other student did the same inquiry on Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander perspectives, but they embedded languages of Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander communities, or you can call it traditional pedagogies, yeah, now in EYLF. And the last one that I really liked was supporting numeracy or literacy. How can I embed this in 3 years old kinder? Yeah,
Mhm.
we all know that emergent literacy is a complex topic, but now EYLF talks about multiliteracies, right? So you might question, what is that for us? What is that for community? How can we incorporate multiliteracies into our program? And this could be definitely what you call a bothering thing, because you never know whether to include Frozen and Bingo and Bluey and Spider-Man into your program, or to keep it out, right? So why would you include it? How do you discuss Superman and superpowers in a more constructive way, or should we just let children be free and enjoy literacies and their funds of knowledge that they bring? So it's interesting tangents that you can take,
Mhm.
right? So,
Yeah, definitely there can be different levels of exploring, and there's no simple question. It's all sound like
mhm,
pretty interesting investigations here that
mhm,
you mentioned,
yeah,
and they are very rewarding.
mhm,
Yeah, it's just it's definitely needs to relate to your group, because
yeah,
when you collect
mhm,
evidence, it's it's a part of your, like they emphasize it everywhere. It's part of your everyday practice. It's what you do already. You're not inventing anything
mhm,
new.
mhm,
You might think of, okay, that's something I'm not embedding. How do I go about it? That's a
yeah,
niggle,
yeah,
definitely. But then it's becoming part of your program. It's not something extra on the top of it. I even
yeah,
in my
yeah,
in my evidence in my termly programming plan
yeah,
had investigation such and such listed and how it's
mhm,
connected to the group.
mhm,
Because I had a niggle about, like in my professional inquiry, about the comprehension. How do
yeah,
children understand, and what level of comprehension do they show, and how, and what
mhm,
influences them? So practically, it was about level of participation, but um,
And what is learning? How do you understand that they've learned something as
Yeah,
well, right? So
exactly.
that's related to concepts, which is outcome four. And then you were thinking about, we don't really know whether children learned anything.
Yeah, yeah, that's because it's a different temperaments, they're different children, different
Yeah,
backgrounds, and it's also directly
yeah,
relates to inclusion. How do you include the children? So
yes, yeah, absolutely.
it's
Um,
it was broad topic and it was big inquiry, but
yeah.
interesting one.
So we can pause for now and start again in a second. Yeah, so just in a different meeting.
Hello again, and unfortunately, it's just me. We had technical difficulties trying to record it together as an interview. So the part about the assessment, a part about the presenting evidence, I'm just going to record by myself. And ahead we go towards the purple card instead of the orange one. So we were talking about how do we follow the steps in the previous part. How do we follow the steps to create the professional inquiry to make it work? Now we're going to look at what the parts of these steps are. And of course, you during your 6 weeks of professional inquiry, you collect the evidence. So that's an important part. And if you find everyone is thinking, oh, did I get enough photos? Did I get enough videos? It's get overwhelming because you want to photograph and have an evidence of everything and anything. But it's only a fraction of what you've collected you're going to present for the panel. And most of it has to be something which is very clearly showing everybody why did you collect that. So of course, I'll just share the screen and show you. Most of the collected evidence will be in photographs and videos. But when you forming the presentation and creating the evidence, you have to think about the assessment part following next. In other words, why you collect why did you take this specific photograph? Why did you take this specific photo of a picture? Why did you make this video? Because sometimes when we're doing an observations, we're looking at all the sorts of development. So it's practically can be a miss. You see something interesting about the child, you take the observation, you take a video, you write the observation, you take a photo. But in this case, you have more narrow focus. And for example, when I was doing my observation, I was looking at the comprehension. This is, oh, beg your pardon. This is my inquiry question, which was refined over several months, I would say, and then finally came up like that. And I was looking into a conceptual playbook. It's the separate story. It's just the beautiful way of embedding STEAM in learning environment, science, technology, and engineering, and the rest. And I mean, and art sometimes it adds up to this to them. And I was looking because in integrated classroom, integrated is the group of the children from different ages, not necessarily babies and toddlers. In my case, it's um, preschoolers and kindergarten children, so 3 and 4 years old. At the start of the year, in the middle of the year, when I was doing an inquiry, we were 3.5, 4.5, some were 5, depending on when we were born. So it's different ways of thinking, different temperaments, different backgrounds. Not just the age is decisive for that age group. If we for the group as we thinking about the integrated classroom. Also, children, they think they're visual and tactile, but they're also very, very different learners. So I was looking at the different style of learning in regards to this inquiry. So how would the comprehension manifest itself through the activities of conceptual play world? What kind of group do I need to form? What kind of evidence I will need to show that I learn about the certain aspects of comprehension? So when I was setting up the activities, obviously were the folders. There were folders and observations alongside them to explain what is happening. There were evidence of my materials used for the activity to explain the points and how the inquiry developed. And there were evidence of progression towards the more comprehensive and subject-related illustrations and maps of our children happening in class. It's another type of evidence. I also had an evidence of incorporating the children ideas in my project, Conceptual Play World. So this was a story based on which it's a told story, Kamishibai style. I wouldn't explain what it is, but it's just story in pictures. And I made it based on the statement about the supermoon. It changed our activities and it give another interesting dimension to our conceptual play world when children were talking about the supermoon. So another evidence of our discussions, children's input again, it's beach cleaning video and watching the video of Port Phillip Bay cleanup. So it's also part of it. And then a reflection on what we were doing, the activities of conceptual play world shared with parents. It's hard to find something which came from parents, say, like some feedback. You can write it down if someone gave you verbal feedback, but that's what I usually would receive, verbal feedback. I don't have many things, I didn't have any responses on our story part posts, and I couldn't present that as an evidence, but I could tell when I was doing the presentation that feedback did exist. So that was an evidence of the efforts put into it and the progression of the project and the focus, but evidence of what I received as a result on what I based my, for example, ideas of level of comprehension they achieved was, for example, this picture. It's an evidence of interpretive comprehension because the child was observing me several times, was very engaged with following the crosses with robot beetles, doing a coding, and she created her own maze for the coding of the robot beetles to make a track for them so they can follow a certain pattern. She actually did quite well. So these are the lines. See, there's a beetles pass through here and here. And here's her cross, for example. Then another evidence of interpretive comprehension, and the boys were doing coding with us, doing these maps and maps with the crosses for robot beetles. and then started making mazes. Mazes were created based on that activity, but wasn't that activity anymore. We weren't making maps anymore. We weren't drawing crosses or even configuring these crosses. They created completely different activity, but based on the same principle. The idea was that what beetles can do if they stuck in a maze. See, the maze is enclosed, and then there's additional learning if the robot actually can move the block. What if there are two blocks? So it's interpretive comprehension. It's understanding of the idea how robot beetles work, understanding of basics of coding, and overall interpretive comprehension. So it's good if you, before even start your inquiry, come across something like this. See this book, Reflect, Respect, Relate, Assessing for Learning and Development in the Early Years Using Observation Scales. So the book is created. There's several observation scales for the professional inquiry, for anything, for assessment in your space. So I chose one of the scales to be my guide and to be my scale for the assessing level of comprehensions I observed. I made a direct correlation between level of participation and comprehension. So I was observing how the children were involved, the level of participation, and let's look at one of the tables I used for it. So it's quantitative and qualitative at the same time, with different level of participation, and there's the outcomes, what we observed when certain activities are happening and certain number of children participating. So my conclusions were not just within this scale, but also about the level of comprehension I could observe. And different levels of maps, for example, like this one. If at the start children had very abstract idea about what map is and how does it work, that's the end result, the final result in term 4 at the very end of the inquiry when the child was at it for a long time and she stepped outside and nobody asked her to do that, but she decided to create the map. So it's still related to the inquiry because it was something, as we were saying, interpretive comprehension. So when she learned something and did something not people weren't expecting her to do, but she was just curious and interested in doing that. So that's about the scale, and I strongly advise you to take a screenshot of this book, find it. Quite possibly you might have it at work, or if not, you can come by it somewhere because these skills are very easy to use. They're very comprehensive, and you can easily understand what kind of scale would be suitable to your case, to your inquiry. So say in this case, I just took the table out of there, but use it for my own needs. Use obviously my own examples for it. So that's about the evidence. And now we can talk about some do's and don'ts of professional inquiry. I'll just stop sharing the screen. So as I was saying at the start, it's quite important that you doing something not extra, not something you just decided to do, but something related to your group. Professional inquiry have to cover the whole group. You are said to have focus children, but it doesn't mean that you base your professional inquiry only on this children learning. No, it has to be the whole group involvement. You closely relate your statements and your ideas to early years learning framework, guidance, and outcomes, practice principles. So when I was presenting my inquiry, that was one of a point of criticism from my for people who were in the panel, is that there was not very clear relation to early learning years framework. So I don't know how better to accomplish it. Maybe use the wording when you write in the text. Maybe read the wording when you if you're presenting it just as a photographs and reading the words. Maybe show connections some other ways. Maybe put just outcomes in brackets when you presenting it. Be quite clear on the question, because you can refine it for sometimes, because if a question is clear and makes sense to you, as my mentor was saying, the professional inquiry will write itself. You will see, you'll just roll through it and put it together quite easily. Not easily, but it will create a flow when the question makes sense to you, when it makes sense to your colleagues, when you support it on what you're doing and understand what you're working on. Also, with presentation, I showed you the PowerPoint presentation I used for my panel. It doesn't have to be PowerPoint presentation. It can be just the text written by you. It doesn't have to be an hour as I did, because my presentation was long with lots of slides. But it can be just a shorter version of it with here what we did, and these are my findings, and these are several photos of the children engaged as an evidence, and you could see my evidence in my file if you would like to. Another important part is, even if you're not the lead educator and you're doing a professional inquiry, although you need to be you need to be teaching to do a professional inquiry, so you are teaching. Professional inquiry better be and should be in your curriculum plan, because it's something you inform the parents and children about. It's something colleagues know about. And it's not just about knowing, it's a part of your work. As I was saying, practice principle 6. That's one of a way to assess how you work and reflect on it and learn from it. It's an investigation which you can later do for your own on your own accord, and just work like that for some niggles you can encounter junior practices. So that was pretty much it. And yeah, and the last moment, please document the visits of the mentor. Mentor is an important figure, but as I was saying, they sometimes learn with you and from you, because some of them, being experienced teachers, of course, have a um, world of knowledge, but they might not have gone through professional inquiries because it didn't exist back when we were doing got to the level they've got. So, while saying so, you can, of course, advise other people, and it would be a good idea to talk to your colleague and coordinate with colleagues with all what you're doing in the same room. That will support you in the professional inquiry a lot. Um, but also document all the visit of your mentor, because it's not very kind of slips off your mind later if you didn't document it straight away. And I didn't write down one of the observations of my mentor, and I just needed later reconstruct it, because there is a form you need to submit as a need to give to your mentor as evidence of your professional inquiry. It's from the form from the booklet. It's only another document you need to do for your professional inquiry. So this is a form with everything included in this form, and some form of presentation, which also have some documented form. It can't be just verbal, because you also have evidence documents, but it can be printed. It doesn't have to be very long. It doesn't have to be the same as mine. So please document all your visits, and of course, visit of teacher you need to observe for your professional inquiry. It's another requirement, but it's quite easy one. It's much harder to wrap your head around the professional inquiry itself. And just in case I didn't talk about it in part one, I don't think I think I did, but just to cap. So the professional standards for teachers, APST, which make everybody freeze. And when do you look at them, and how does it all tying up with professional inquiry? So I hope you will be, when you start professional inquiry, going to the PD, VIT PD, which gives you some light on that. It's you can go to community of practices, with Alma Fleet or other presenters. But what you're looking for, community of practice is supposed to run every term. It's free. It's some salmon and slattery professional development session, which is for parts, but it's worth it if you're starting a professional inquiry. But it sort of gives you an idea of how you address these professional teacher standards. We don't work with them, we work with early learning framework. And there's 40 something of them, and you wouldn't address all of these descriptors with your professional inquiry. I left out one or two, and the form of you filling in for professional inquiry for your mentor have a special section where you can write what you didn't address and why. And I also wrote there where I cover in this specific professional standard in my practice, but not in this inquiry. So you can do it, but when you already collected your evidence, I would advise you not to go into it before because it's just too confusing. When you collected your evidence, you look at the standards and think, okay, I address this, and this. Can I also address this and this, for example? Sometimes you wouldn't include it in your professional, in your presentation, but you can say it while you're doing your presentation that I address because your panel will be looking at the professional standards through your presentation. They will be actually learning from there, unless you gave them the separate booklet, printed presentation. Whatever you say and whatever you show have to address these professional standards. I hope it wasn't very confusing for you. At first, I said not to look at the professional standards up until the point you doing your presentation. You're collecting your evidence, and then I'm saying, oh, everybody's going to look at your professional standards. It's just when you're doing it, you addressing lots of them already, I'm sure, because you working with early years learning framework, you using the early years framework scale, and to make sure it's happening right, you just check yourself at that point. Look at all the professional standards and then make sure that they're all there, or if something is not there, you can look into it and see, like, think, why didn't you address this professional standard, and where do you address it in your practice? So not all the evidence have to go into your presentation when you're presenting it. You can refer to some of the evidence you keep at home. But another criticism from my panel was that not evident link to the curriculum to my planning template. So if I would be doing it today, at one of the slides, I would show the professional inquiry was part of my curriculum. It's on a plan. It was on a plan at a time, and it was linked to the individual children profiles as well. So make sure you do that and have it as a evidence as well. And have a good inquiry. If you have any questions about it, I'm sure you will have more. You can comment under when Katya will upload this video. And good luck with your inquiry. Have a lovely evening. Bye.